Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a little bit more than a week. So let's get into this week in sports, shall we? Now, a couple of logistical things. Firstly, this episode I was just doing on my computer entirely. It will help with audio things as well. I might go back to playing games, just not for the next couple of weeks. So this week and next week. I've been sick. That's why I haven't been able to upload. I'm recovering. I'm fine. Just a little bit sick. Wasn't really feeling it. I'll record this one right now, and I'll probably record next next week's now as well for Thursday. So this will just be the week that I missed, and yeah, let's get into it, right? Shall we? So this week I will talk specifically about World Cup qualifying, the ALDS and NLDS series, and just the Jets at the end. I'm not even going to talk about the rest of football. The rest of football goes on, people care about that. I think it's really funny that I'm just going to talk about the Jets. All right, so first let's get into this. Let's get into World Cup qualifying. Well, 28 of the 48 teams have now qualified for the World Cup. And before we actually get into the actual World Cup qualifying, I want to talk about briefly the 48 team structure that changed from 32 to 48. I've seen a lot of people hate on it, but personally, I really like it. I like the idea of having more teams. I might make a video about it closer to the World Cup, but I think it's good. I think it's a net good. I think the only negative thing would be for fans trying to watch more games if you expand it even further. That's the only real negative that I see. I mean, outside of that, the difference between 48 and 64, every team doesn't play every team plays the same amount of games in that frame how I would do it. But that's not something I want to talk about. I think 48 teams is a good number of teams. How they're distributed, personally, I don't really like as much, but I still do think, hey, they are. I understand it, and I think it's a good move to add more teams to the World Cup. So let's get into it. Let's start with Africa because Africa is always the most interesting. Egypt have already qualified, and Burkina Faso had done an amazing job in their group. They were just really unfortunate to be in a group with Egypt, but Egypt qualified for the World Cup a while ago. Um, Senegal finally got it done. I believe, yes, because DR Congo gave them a good run for their money. I think it took to the last match week where they won their last game, and they did it very convincingly. And yeah, props to also DR Congo as well for playing out of their minds. We'll get to Group C in a minute. Everybody, round of applause for Cape Verde. Cabo Verde, how the heck did you qualify for the World Cup, the second smallest nation? It's something that they should be proud of. It's something you should be very proud of. They played very well in this group. They, I mean, look at their record in the last 5 games to get the job done. They did it over Cameroon, nonetheless, an historic footballing nation. The great Andre Onana um, plays for Cameroon. No, Cameroon did stumble at the end. They didn't even make it close to the win, but now they will be going into the playoffs, and I think the playoffs will be really competitive this season. Group E is the most interesting group because, yeah, Morocco won all of the games, and Eritrea did. They did decide that they didn't want their players seeking political asylum, so they decided to not participate in the World Cup qualifying. But it made it interesting for all the other teams. And Niger did climb into second, and we'll talk about that in a second when we talk about the qualifying. But I just want to go through all these groups really quickly because this is the World Cup qualifying that I do care about. Um, I mean, Ivory Coast not conceding a single goal. I think that's something to applaud. And Gabon doing very well, but they were in a group with the Ivory Coast. They weren't going to. They won the same amount of games. They lost a game, and all of a sudden, look at where they are in the World Cup qualifying playoffs. So we'll get that in a second. Again, um, Uganda stumbled last minute. They had a really good opportunity to get into the playoffs, but they're eliminated now because they lost 2-1 to Algeria, and they were winning. They were winning that game for a long period of time, and they just decided to lose at the end. Something else I want to talk about very briefly about Group F is commiserations for Seychelles. How do you play and concede 53 goals and only score 2? Like, if they had given Eritrea 3-0 defeats for 10 fixtures, they would still do better off than what Seychelles did by participating. And that's really saying something. So yeah, um, Group H. Group H was again one of those straightforward ones as well. You had Tunisia, who absolutely rocked Group H, similarly to how Ivory Coast rocked Group F. But instead of having a competitive second place team, you had Namibia and all of these other teams who couldn't put together more than 4 wins, which surprisingly 4 wins was enough for Nigeria, but not for any of these other teams. All right, let's not. And finally, Group I, Ghana qualified, and Ghana qualified essentially a couple of match weeks ago. I know that they only technically qualified in the last match week, but it was fantastic. It was fantastic to see, and the only reason that Madagascar didn't qualify for the final day is because Mali decided to step up when it mattered least and screw over Madagascar because they don't believe in fun. But Madagascar, fair play to them. They did well up until the last game, and it'll be really interesting to see what they could do in the future. Right? It's a little unfortunate for them, but I think it'd be really interesting. So now let's get to Group C. But before we get to that, let's talk about the second place ranking. A bit of a spoiler here, as you can see, but Nigeria, on 15 points, qualified for the World Cup playoffs. And you might be thinking, but Nigeria didn't get 15 points. They got 17 points. And how did that happen? Well, the Eritrea situation caused Group E here to have 2 less games. And the way that the CAF and FIFA decided to deal with this for their playoff spot in Africa was actually kind of clever. Now, my base thing would be, hey, just give every team 3-0 wins against them, and they'll be on their merry way. And so then you'd have Niger with 6 more points, right? But that would be unfair because not every last place team is just a gimme. It should have been in this situation, but it wasn't. So instead, what they do is the more clever way of doing it, which is the second place teams only get second place points. And what this means is just that your games against last place no longer count. And Nigeria here had a terrible, terrible run to start. I mean, they drew a ton of their games. They drew half of their games. And you can see their record. 3 of their 4 wins came in their last 5 games. So the first 5 games, they decided they didn't want to really play. They had 3 draws, a win, and a loss, which is not good enough for Nigeria to their standard. But they drew their last place team both games, which means they're sitting on 15 points in the second place qualification. All of a sudden, they've snuck in and aren't eliminated yet. This is rather interesting because on the last match week, they were in third. That's right. They were below Benin. Benin was top of the group. And how it worked was South Africa were second on 15 points. They went away to Rwanda and got the win that they needed, which props. I'm so glad that South Africa is back in the World Cup. Everybody order your vuvuzelas now. We're going to have a fun time, all right? We're going to have a party, and that's what we want. Nigeria had 14 points, and they played Benin at home, and it was all up to them. It was their fate in their hands. They needed a little help from Rwanda to get it automatically, but they just needed to beat Benin by multiple goals to leapfrog them in the group and potentially get a playoff spot. And they did. Super Victor Osimhen decided that he would go sicko mode, and he scored a hat trick, and they won 4-0 at home. And so you're thinking, unfortunate for Benin. They were given a position because South Africa decided to field a player who wasn't registered. But they were top of the group, coming into the last match week, and all of a sudden they're third and they're out of the World Cup. And, props to Benin. It would have been cool to see them in the World Cup. But instead we got South Africa. And now we have a really interesting playoff group. It's not over for Nigeria, but I believe they play Gabon. And if they beat Gabon, then they had to play one of DR Congo and Cameroon. And if they beat them, Then they have to go into the World Cup qualifying. This is going to be really interesting because Cameroon and Nigeria are two powerhouses, and at most, one of the two of them will make the World Cup. So we've got a lot of entertainment on our hands with the World Cup qualifying the next few months, the November international break, and then again in March. And I think it'll be really interesting to see what happens. I kind of want Cameroon to go through, although like any of these teams making, as long as they make the World Cup, I think it's fun. I prefer Cameroon, of course, but that's just me. And again, I'm very happy that South Africa made it to the World Cup. I think it's a very interesting thing. But they're not the only teams that have punched their tickets for the World Cup qualifying. Okay, let's head to Asia now, where the fourth stage had started and concluded, and that had taken Qatar and Saudi Arabia to the World Cup. Now, these two were in the previous World Cup. Saudi Arabia was a bit of a lock-in. They had a tough day against Iraq. Both of these teams swamped on Indonesia. Indonesia are not qualifying for the World Cup, but they've got pretty far, right? They drew each other 0-0. And it just came down to who had the better win. And Saudi Arabia scored more goals. And that's all it was, right? Okay. And in Group A, Qatar, they drew against Oman 0-0. And Oman then lost to the UAE. And the UAE fell 2-1 to Qatar. And so now we have a fifth stage, which would be the UAE versus Iraq. And they play for the playoff spot, from my knowledge. Oceania is already done. Let's head to North and Central America really quick. I think there's nothing really much to say about the Asia qualifying. We'll see how it unfolds later. But let's hop into North and Central America. Obviously, the big dogs are already qualified. US, Canada, Mexico. All three of them are already qualified. But look at how these groups are shaping up. Where we're looking at second place teams and we're looking at World Cup promotion. Suriname is leading their group halfway through. This is halfway through, of course. Anything can happen in the second half. But the big thing is this Group B here, where Jamaica fell to Curacao, who had a good window. They beat Jamaica, they drew Trinidad and Tobago, and they're sitting 1 point behind Jamaica, but they beat Jamaica. And, they get to play Bermuda again. Hopefully they redeem themselves. And you can have now, they would be the smallest nation, I believe, to qualify for the World Cup. Currently, of all time, it's still Iceland, but then second is Cape Verde. And there are some micronations that could technically qualify from Oceania. Just one, actually. Let me see who it is really quickly. New Caledonia. New Caledonia could still qualify, but it's very likely that Jamaica could fall. Now, it'd be great to see Jamaica in the World Cup. I think it'd be vibes, but they could fall. And as we see in Group C, another big shock, Costa Rica have fallen a little bit. 3 draws. They haven't lost, but 3 draws is not good. And you'd hope they could turn around in the second half. Their only win coming from bottom of the group, Nicaragua, who seems to be unable to buy a win. And they have 2 games left. Their next match is Haiti. But they drew against Nicaragua, and they're not playing Nicaragua again. So they have Haiti and Honduras. I lied about Curacao. They're done playing Trinidad and Tobago. They had to play Jamaica again, but they get to play Bermuda again. And Jamaica have already played Bermuda twice. So that's an extra 3 points that they could get very easily. Could. Nothing's given, nothing's guaranteed. But hey, should. And so it sets up an interesting match week against Jamaica. That's the big one. The last match week against Jamaica. You have a little bit of a warm-up, but you got to go and win there. All right. And finally, let's head into Europe, because Europe's the big dogs. All right. And only one team's qualified, and that's the mighty England. England. They have qualified for the World Cup. And props to them. They haven't conceded a single goal yet, I believe. Yep. And they've won all of their games. But now here's the interesting thing. I learned the other day is because of how qualifying works. San Marino can qualify, and they can qualify by losing. Now it's a long shot, but they can still qualify for the second place spots. So how it works in Europe is all the first place teams automatically qualify. All the second place teams are put into a tournament where they play a semifinal and final against. So that's each group of 4 teams. So it's 4 groups of 4 teams. So it's 12 of the second place teams plus 4 teams who qualify through their Nations League play. And San Marino won their Nations League group, so it's a long shot, but they could qualify. Ronaldo scored 2 goals in a draw against Hungary, uh, and missed a penalty in a win against Ireland. I went to that Ireland game. That video will be out Tuesday. I have all of the footage. I will give you the video, I promise. But yeah, I'll talk about that. And yeah, it was a very interesting game. It was very evenly matched versus Hungary, and believe it or not, I think all of these second place groups are kind of still in this. Portugal had to play Ireland again, so it's a little tough for Ireland, but Ireland are at home. Portugal have all but qualified. They need another win. They need one of the 2 games to win, and it could be against Armenia. Here's the thing though: Armenia beats Hungary, Ireland beat Portugal, and all of a sudden, Portugal still qualified, but most likely. But all of a sudden, the rest of the group is blown open. Like, Ireland could lose, but if Armenia win, second place is not confirmed for anybody. First place is confirmed for Portugal, but so Portugal don't necessarily have to win, but it's blown open. A group that's not blown open is Spain. Holy moly! Like, this is the most expectation that I've ever seen. Like, I expect Spain to win all of their games, and I expect Turkey to win every game but one, which would be against Spain, who decided to mollyrock, like to just send them. They sent them to the Ottoman Empire because holy 6-0. Spain haven't conceded a goal. Spain are looking. They all but qualify. Okay, they play one more game, they win that, they qualify. It's against Georgia. But I mean, even if Bulgaria managed to sneak a win against Turkey, Spain qualify. This group is rather interesting. It's panning out how I would expect it to pan out. And it's an interesting group because France dropped their game to Iceland. And they have to play Ukraine and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan's a free win. So France will most likely qualify automatically in November. But the interesting thing is the Ukraine-Iceland dynamic. And it's interesting because, both of these teams are pretty equally competitive. Now, speaking of equally competitive, let's look at Group C, which is probably the most competitive. And it all comes down to Denmark, Scotland drew against each other. It all comes down to that final match day of Denmark, Scotland. And the winner of that game goes to the World Cup automatically, and the loser plays the tournament. Now, something shocking can happen next week where Belarus pick up a win against Denmark or Greece pick up a win against Scotland. But it's not likely. And so you're looking at a rather interesting debacle. I know I'm going backwards here, but there's a lot of groups to go through. So I'm just trying to go through them as quickly as possible. Group B is rather interesting because Sweden can still qualify for the playoff tournament because of their Nations League qualifications, even though they're absolutely ass. I mean, they're getting rocked in a group with Kosovo and Slovenia, where you would argue that the Swedish team with Isak and Gyökeres up top and talent throughout should be qualifying for the World Cup. This is not Swedish meatballs playing. These are Premier League professionals. These are the most sought after strikers in the world. These are an insane level of talent, and they are fumbling hard. Now, speaking of fumbling hard, Germany are not runaway leaders right now. They lost their first game to Slovakia. They've been recovering ever since. But, it's not an easy road for them. They have to. Luxembourg's an easy win, right? And you would hope that maybe Northern Ireland get the job against Slovakia a little bit if you're a German fan. But you need to go and win against Slovakia in your last match day to qualify for the World Cup automatically, because you don't want to be where Italy were in 2022, as well as Portugal. You don't want to be in that qualification. You don't want to have to play another team and not qualify for the World Cup. It's very bad if you don't. But looking at some of the five team uh, five team groups, Netherlands look like they'll qualify. They beat Poland, they qualify. Um, but yeah, they beat Poland. Finland beat Malta, and all of a sudden it looks a little bit dicey for the Polish for qualifying in second place. But anything can happen. This group looks pretty wrapped up as well. I know Austria just lost against Romania, and that's a little bit shocking. And that helps out Romania because Romania played Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Austria play Cyprus. So Austria should get the win, right? And that game means a lot. And that game also means a lot to San Marino people. I forget. I think they need Romanians to qualify over Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I don't remember the logic. It's ridiculous logic, anyways. This is the most interesting group here, Group I. Norway will qualify top of the group. Look at the goal difference, 26 to 10. 26 to 10 is ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's not going to be caught up. I understand Italy play Moldova. Italy would have to dunk on their heads an 11-0 fixture and then go play Norway and beat them convincingly still. Like, you have to, a 3-0 win. And this Norway team don't look like they're giving that up that easily. Okay. Now, Italy have played well. They just lost their first match week to top of the group. But Italy are going to go through those qualifiers again, is what it looks like. And you would hope they don't face North Macedonia again, which looks likely. Israel have failed to qualify, which solves a lot of different social problems, thank God, and a lot of different protesting that doesn't need to happen because they're not good enough to qualify on their own. And two more groups, because I talked about England already. Belgium, this is kind of shaky because North Macedonia the top three teams could still qualify. I mean, they have one more game left. This is their last game. They play Wales, and that's a must-win for them, right? Because if Wales win, all of a sudden, Wales have another game on their hands. I don't know who it's against, but they have another game on their hands where they could just overtake North Macedonia. And Belgium, they would like that, obviously, because that holds those groups down. It only forces them to get one more win, as opposed to winning out. But it looks very likely that Belgium could make the World Cup because their next game is against Kazakhstan. And bar a miracle, Kazakhstan are already eliminated, I believe. So, bar some vengeance, Belgium should go through. And this group is also interesting because you have politically tense Serbia versus Albania, which might decide the group. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Now, Group L is very interesting for one reason only. The Faroe Islands could qualify for the World Cup still. It's a bit of a long shot. Their last game comes against Croatia. Now, if for some reason the Czech Republic lose to Gibraltar, for some miracle reason, if they lose to Gibraltar, first of all, that means Croatia automatically qualifies. And they don't have to play another game. And then maybe they lose to the Faroe Islands. And then it looks rather interesting for the Faroe Islands, who might not even need the loss. They might only need the draw. They might just need like a 3-all thriller or something like that. Well, they have a better goal difference. If the Czech Republic lose, so they play out a boring 0-0, and the Faroe Islands qualify for the playoffs. And that would be interesting. That'd be rather interesting. It looks a little bit like hope is lost for them, but you know what? 4 wins in this group. I'm assuming both of you, it's Montenegro and Gibraltar that you beat, but it's good. It's good work for Faroe Islands, and it's unfortunate that they might not probably won't qualify for the World Cup. All right, let's move on to baseball. I'm only talking about the divisional series. I'm only talking about the divisional series. We'll talk about my Blue Jays in next week. Okay, it's not looking good, Brev. You're hoping that you come away with a win, but like I said last week or over a week ago, it feels like an eternity. The Yankees did lose to the Blue Jays. That's what got them there. The Mariners almost didn't make it. Tigers brought it back to 2-2, and they played a tumultuous 15-inning Game 5, which the Mariners won bottom of the 15th in a very tense game. They were at home, and, somebody is sitting there watching innings 7 through 14. That's like 7 innings of nothing, 7.5 innings of nothing. But they got their win in the end. And Big Dumper might be hitting to the World Series, but he definitely head to the LCS. Now, I was talking about it last time, but I didn't actually talk about what happened. The Dodgers, they won 3-1 in LA against Philly, and how they won was a bottom of the 11th error. Let's call it what it was. It was an error from Kirkering, however you say his name, which saw the Dodgers go through. And it's a there's a very famous image. Let's see if we can pull it up on Google. Well, there's this, obviously. But yeah, that's him fielding a ground ball. He stumbles a little bit. Bases are loaded. He can throw it to first. He throws home, and he whiffs the throw. Let me see if I can get an image of that. Look at this. Right here. Look at where the runner is. He can throw it to first. You can't even see my finger. Look at where the runner is. He can throw it to first. He throws it home. He whiffs the throw. He throws it here. You end the inning. That was the end of the inning. You end the inning by throwing to first. But instead, you throw home, you throw it over, you wild throw it, and the Dodgers go through to play the Brewers. Now, they didn't know they were playing the Brewers at the time, but the Brewers got the best of the Cubs in 5 games. And that was rather interesting as well. There were a lot of home runs in this game, I believe. I think it was purely long ball. That yep, 4 home runs, and that's what decided the game. And the Cubs go home, and the Brewers go on to face the Dodgers in the LCS. And I know what happens, and you probably know what happens. And to be honest, let's just talk about it, because I think I'm only going to talk about the Blue Jays next week. The Brewers got their asses whooped by the Dodgers, who decided to not make it interesting whatsoever. And I think the highlight of this is this game 4, where Shohei Ohtani shows why he is the two-way player. 3 solo home runs and a walk. He went 3 for 3. And on the pitching side, pitched 6 innings, gave up 2 hits, 3 walks, and had 10 strikeouts. To have 10 strikeouts and 3 home runs in a single game, either one of those feats would be monumentous for the player that does it in a postseason game. But to do both of them at the same time, you got to give your hats off. And so now the Big Bad Dodgers will unfortunately be in the World Series. The Power of Friendship Brewers could not do it. They stumbled, even though they had a great regular season. And on the flip side, you're looking at the Blue Jays, who can only hope to go into a game seven against the Mariners, and the Canadian Power Friendship. It's looking a little weak against the against the Power Friendship Seattle edition. It started off poorly at home. They lost these two games, but then they went to Seattle and decided they wanted to start winning. They won 13-4. Okay, so we're back. It did just cut out. We'll get back into it. Top of the second sucks. All right. What I was saying is they decided, they were going to come back in Seattle, and they brought it back to 2-2. They gave up a grand slam in the bottom of the eighth. They gave up 5 runs in the bottom of the eighth. They were winning 2-1. And there's a lot that was going into this, but that grand slam could have sealed their fate. Now they need to win Toronto, and Toronto is not an easy place to go and get a win. But at the same time, this is a Mariners team that are looking to that are gunning for that World Series. Now I want to pivot briefly to basketball because I wanted to earlier, and I just wanted to talk about the NBA hasn't started. Okay, they're in preseason. Preseason is not real. Everybody knows that. Except for when I talk about Man United in preseason. Preseason is then totally real. The NBA will start soon, so we will start to talk about the NBA not next week, but the week after. But LeBron James. LeBron Braun Pookie Bear James, my GOAT, my savior, my hero, LeBron James, had recently gone and made The Decision Part 2, Electric Boogaloo, which had put everybody into a spiral thinking, is he gone? Is he going to retire at the end of the season? Oh my gosh. And people were buying tickets to that last Lakers game to watch him ball out, not realizing that he would, of course, be injured for that last Lakers game down the stretch and just come back for the playoffs like he always does. But instead, he got the internet hyped up for Hennessy, and I think that's really funny. Honestly, does LeBron James? Holy crap! But anyways, I find it rather funny that the internet fell for it again. So this week's Fell For It Again award goes to the internet. Now, we pivot to the Jets. Last week, the U.S. decided to send their finest. We'll talk about that. That's irrelevant. They decided to send their finest two football establishments to the UK when they sent the Jets and the Broncos. I'm, of course, joking. They sent the most ass-based football game known to man. Now, the Broncos won this one because if you play the Jets, you need to win. Otherwise, you're not a real football establishment. And the Jets were 0-6 at this point. They're now 0-7, which makes sense. They only gave up 13 points in this game. But it was rather interesting. The Jets have set new record lows. They did not score a touchdown. It was a safety and 2 field goals. Their defense decided, let's actually try and do something, and their offense decided not today. This 45 yards from Justin Fields is really funny because I believe he had negative yards. He had negative 10 yards, which set a record. I, sitting on my couch, had more yards than Justin Fields that day. And so that's why the Jets will be calling me up next season. Now, I didn't want to announce it like this, but this is how we have to announce it. I'll be playing for the New York Jets. They can't get any worse. But they can, actually. They've only conceded 26 points in 2 game weeks, which is interesting. Their defense decided to play well. Their offense decides they don't want to play. And that's the story of it. The Jets decide they don't want to play, and so then they don't. No touchdowns in the past 2 weeks, and they are just abysmal. So if I spend any more time talking about the Jets, I think it just it just won't look good for me. So I'll briefly pivot to the fact that the Giants won against the Eagles. The Giants just lost again, but yeah, that's expected, and it was a close game, so it's fun. But the Giants beat the Eagles, and they didn't just beat the Eagles; they beat down on the Eagles, and everyone's talking about this, and I think it's rather interesting. Um, the Giants decided to turn up. Now, obviously, no two teams in New York can win more than like 10 games combined, but for one of their 10, it's a good one to win. It's an exciting one for Giants fans. One more game I want to talk about was the Lions and Chiefs, because I knew at the end of this there was a bit of a spat. It's not talked about here, but I believe two players decided that they got into a fight. Right? Was it? No. Look at me being professional. This was last week, obviously. Oh, yeah. Brian Branch decided that he wasn't having it at the end, and he decided to yeah, he decided he was going for it. He decided he wasn't taking nothing from no Kansas City Chief. All right, he smacked this. He smacked this man. He smacked Juju like the Eagles smacked the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Okay, he smacked this man so hard. I'm voting for Mahomes, which isn't. I can't condone it, but I can say it is funny. And so we will leave on that note. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you like this format, because this format's not leaving for the next week. All right. I'll bring back the sports games eventually. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, this was watchable. It's a very long one, but I'll see you next week.